with the defeat of the Arab-led countries, Lebanon, Syria, Egypt, to Israel in the Six-Day War, pan-Arab nationalism was seen as a liability for the rise of the Islamic movement. And so, with the Wahhabists remaining underground, they now began to clamor for a change in these Arab socialist governments in the Middle East, which gives us the key period to the rise of the Islamic caliphate or the Islamic fundamentalist movement. And that year is 1979. Many key events which precipitated the rise of the fundamentalist Islamic unions arose out of this period between 1979 and 1980. First being the invasion of the Soviets into Kabul, the capital of Afghanistan, in which there was a call of global jihad, where Afghans, as well as foreign Arabs, were invited to fight against a secular invader. Second, the Grand Mosque Seizure in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, the Grand Kaaba, led by Muhammad al-Khattabi, who considered himself the next Mahdi, in which he sees himself as the Redeemer. And this actually precipitated a fracture, a sectarian divide within the kingdom of Saudi Arabia, and the rise of the religious school of thought of Ibn Taymiyyah, Ibn Hanbal, the notable theologians of the Hadiths, the Wahhabi school of thought, which were at war with the government itself, because the government wasn't as radical as its adherents located north of the country, in which al-Khattabi wanted to bring about the attention that Saudi Arabia should go back to an early century type of government led by Sharia law, even though it was, but they did not agree with Saudi Arabia's tentative relationship with the United States and Western powers. Another event that took place was in Egypt, and that was the assassination of Egyptian President Anwar Sadat. Sadat was seen as a reformist, unlike his former previous president, Gamal Abdel Nasser, who actually was a major proponent for an Arab nationalism or pan-Arabism. Later it was called Nasserism. Sadat was actually lenient toward the ultra-Orthodox of his country and released many of these troubling individuals out of the more infamous jails free from torture. But after Sadat was killed, the government was now led by Egyptian Morsi, I believe. I'm going to look up his name because I don't want to make it that I'm incorrect. It was, I believe, sorry for the interruption, but I do want to make sure I'm right and not lead you into believing. So after Sadat, I think so. Hosni Mubarak. Sorry about that. Yeah, Hosni Mubarak. But Mubarak was also injured during the gunfight. I believe he was shot in the wrist or in the shoulder. Mubarak was actually very harsh to the religious sector, and he cracked down very hard and arrested hundreds of people, even suspected of being friends with elements within the Egyptian Islamic Jihad or the Gamma Islamiyah. 2 individuals who were actually arrested would have later ramifications for the globe, and that would be Ayman al-Zawahiri of Egyptian Islamic Jihad and Omar Abdel Rahman from Gamma Islamiyah. Another turbulent event that would happen in 1979 was the Iranian Revolution, the Shia revolution, the uprising against the Western-backed puppet government of Reza Pahlavi, the last Shah of Iran, in which he fled from the country, and it was led by Khomeini. And so the Arab fundamentalist world was now beginning to rise out of the shadows and promote themselves as the new ideology to replace Arab nationalism or socialism itself, in which we are still seeing the effects of these changes even today. Even Islamic fundamentalist groups far more extremist than the groups that arose out of 1979 and 1980. Now, this became the replacement of the Cold War enemy for the United States. Some of these movements were led by the intelligence apparatus of the CIA and also the Pakistan ISI. They actually had funded the Mujahideen in Afghanistan, and there is some evidence to suggest that the Safari Club, which was an intelligence clandestine group that had CIA elements within it that were behind the Iranian Revolution itself or played a part of it, which wouldn't surprise me in the least, and see the destabilization of once prosperous Arab countries now led by these ultra-Orthodox groups that only know violence as its essence. According to Muhammad ibn al-Faraj, who was part of the Egyptian Islamic Jihad, the reason for Sadat's assassination wasn't because of the Camp David Accords and his meeting with Menachem Begum in Israel, but he wanted a caliphate to rule Egypt, an Islamic-led country. Most of these groups actually just want that, and they go by the tenets of Sayyid Qutb. Sayyid Qutb, who is who was co-founder of the Muslim Brotherhood and also author of many books as well, including one was Millstones, in which he made a visit to the United States, and he came back suggesting that Arab governments were heading in that direction, becoming too westernized, too wasteful. He saw the United States as a very wasteful country, an immoral country, and he didn't want that for these Arab countries. And so he proposed an idea in which he wanted Arab governments to be replaced with Sharia-led governments or courts, an ulema of sorts, led by a Sharia-backed judicial government itself. And so in order to do that, they had to forcibly replace these secular governments with proponents of Wahhabi Islam, and then slowly transform the country into a religious-based, Sharia-based country itself. And he knew that this would take some time over the years. But his idea wasn't lost on many people. In fact, after his death, he became a global martyr in which many of the future proponents of Islamic fundamentalism saw him as the major influence in their lives. Some of them you've heard before. Osama bin Laden was one. Ayman al-Zawahiri, Abdullah Azzam, who was considered the godfather of defensive jihad. many other Islamic individuals that later played a part would have their initial beginnings regarding the teachings of Sayyid Qutb. So I would say to you, to understand the jihadist nature of today is to return to a point in time and to trace back the steps as to where these beginnings transpired from, emanated from. And I would submit to you that the key period of what we're seeing today in countries like the Sudan, Syria, Libya, Iraq, Afghanistan, Pakistan, the Balkans, what's left, Azerbaijan, Waziristan, Indonesia, Malaysia. These are all countries that have or who are rife with fundamentalism today, and which it is being supported through billions of dollars of funding from the country that promotes Wahhabi ideals, and that's Saudi Arabia, in which the United States should designate as a terrorist country, which it doesn't, because the United States government are a bunch of hypocrites, because the Democratic and Republican parties, some of them, have financial ties to the kingdom themselves through oil pipelines, and they regulate the oil, and have been for decades, in which our country is willing to turn a blind eye, even at times openly support some of these fundamentalist groups, one of which was Operation Timber Sycamore under then U.S. President Barack Obama, in which he and King Abdullah and Benjamin Netanyahu created an operation that was directed through the CIA, in which they would train and fund members of al-Nusra and give them weapons to fight against the government led by Bashar al-Assad in Syria. And on the other hand, you have U.S. soldiers there in the United States trying to fight off Islamic State and other radical groups. Meanwhile, we were funding them. Well, that ended in 2017 when Donald Trump actually ended the program. But you understand where I'm coming from, that we have a nefarious agency in the CIA and other intelligence apparatuses like the Pakistan ISI, Israeli Mossad, who are actually tentatively helping these Islamic organizations fight off against these governments that we should be supporting. Instead, we're overthrowing them, much like what we did with Muammar Gaddafi. Other countries as well. Egypt, Iran. In 1953, we assassinated Mohammad Mossadegh. The country has been reeling since. The countries that we should be designated as terrorists, we're allied with. And the countries that we are allied with should be labeled as terrorists. And it's plain and simple like that. But like I said, we're a hypocritical nation led by foreign lobby institutes that are catering to their own agendas and not to the American people. And I think that's the problem that we're witnessing today.